down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world, investors alike, and soon to be even better investors. Why? One of my real mentors. Yep, you hear me talk about people. Who do I call when I'm dying on a contract for deed? Or I don't even know what a self-directed IRA is. Well, I do, but I'm just playing. It's my honor, and for real, Bob Dressman is a guy that I vicariously want to be like, live like, not because he has a cool Tesla that is one of my dream cars. We'll leave that alone. We'll talk about that on another day. But this very intelligent, I think the word smart is not enough, intelligent, passionate person about real estate investing. I've met Bob several years ago in Ohio at the National RIA, and what I learned, there was an intimate group, about 50 of us, and what I've learned that Bob is passionate about being an investor, not a part-time investor, not a guy that's just flippantly saying things like, oh, I invest in my IRA. This gentleman on the phone right now has taken little money and has turned it into a lot of money. And I'm honored that you're coming to Investor Weekend in a few weeks. And no more introduction because we're going to learn more about you, Bob Dressman.
Hey, I'm glad to be with you, Stephen.
Kind of a weird, off-the-cuff introduction. So, Bob, you're in Cincinnati, Ohio. Is that where you're from? Were you born there? Tell us a little bit about you. And
I was born here in Cincinnati, went to Miami University, which is about 45 minutes north of here. Got a degree in economics, got out of Miami and got a real job for about 9 months. I promptly got fired from that job. From there, I had actually bought a house before I got fired from that job. I was in the process of fixing it up. After I got fired, I went and became a real estate agent because I figured, hey, that guy that sold me that house seemed to make an awful lot of money and didn't seem to have to work too hard. So from there, I started selling HUD and VA foreclosures as a real estate agent. Then I was selling mostly to investors. And every once in a while, I'd find something that was a really good deal and couldn't convince anybody else to buy it. So I'd say, hell with you guys. If you won't buy it, I will. And then over time, I sort of bought more real estate and sold less until the point where I wasn't a real estate agent anymore and was just managing my own stuff. And then sort of over the years, then I learned about self-directed IRAs and tax-free investing, CISA accounts and self-directed HSAs, and the whole lending business. And that's got me excited and moving forward to this day. So it's been a fun ride so far.
Now you're a full-time investor, but you also manage other properties. During that process, what made you decide to be a property manager?
So what happened is I had a couple hundred properties, and so when you have a couple hundred properties, you need to have some way of managing them. And so in the process of managing those properties, I effectively set up a property management company. And then I'd have people that would knock on my door and say, hey, will you manage my stuff too? And so more by accident than on purpose. I mean, I think today we managed a little over 1,000 units. And I've never actually gone out and advertised or looked for business. It just seems to find me, just because there aren't a whole lot of people in the world that are even moderately competent at managing properties. So
true. Similar situation. That's why I have my own property management company. After 100 units, you got to have economies of scale. During that process of building that property management, where you've always been in love with IRAs or the compounding effect, tell me the relation between the two. Are they just two separate entities in your mind, or you just set it and forget it, or what gets you juiced up on the IRA stuff?
Well, the cool thing about the IRA stuff is that, so rental properties have some fundamental tax advantages on their own, but rental properties also come with their own set of hassles that are sort of hard to get around, and that you at times feel like you're always beating your head against the wall. And so I really like using my self-directed accounts. Number one, because of the power of compounding in a tax-free environment. You can turn a very small amount of money into a whole bunch of money in relatively short periods of time. And there are some techniques that you can use in that type of environment that you might not want to do outside of there just because you'd get killed in taxes. And so if you ever run the numbers between doing an investment that's not tax advantaged outside of an IRA versus inside of an IRA, it's just astonishing, the difference in terms of the amount of money you end up with in the long run.
So you look at it as a tool, whatever's going to fit that best investment at that specific time?
Yeah, well, absolutely. There's, as an investors, we have lots of different tools that we use. My self-directed IRA is one. My property management company is another. Being able to finance properties is another. There are times that I lend money to other people. That's another tool that enables me to generate a high rate of return. There are some houses that I would never want to buy and spend the money to fix up and then rent out because it wouldn't generate enough return. But with those same properties, I can generate a very high yield or internal rate of return by buying them, not fixing them up, and selling them to somebody with owner financing. So what
return are you looking for? Is there like a criteria that you always try to stick with? Like, you pull off that tool off the shelf, hey, that's my self-directed IRA, I'm just going to hold the contract in that, or you're actually going to buy and hold it in there, or what determines those decisions?
So stuff that you do in a self-directed IRA needs to be stuff that you're not super personally involved in. And then ideally you want to have a high internal rate of return. So on my self-directed accounts, I try and shoot for at least a 20 to 25% internal rate of return. I tend not to want to put rental properties in my self-directed IRAs because that creates a whole conundrum in terms of getting the properties managed, because you really can't do that yourself within a self-directed IRA. And then the other thing too is with a rental property, since you have the depreciation deduction, you're not going to end up paying a lot of tax on the money you're making out of that. So it's sort of a waste of gunpowder to throw that in a self-directed IRA at times.
Now, you mentioned the word 24% return. What in the world investment instruments are you doing to get those good returns? People, look at me funky when I say I'm getting 18 on a regular. I get 20, but 24 is like in the hood. What investments are you doing to get those returns? Are those lending? Tell me about that.
So I do quite a bit of hard money lending. My standard terms for hard money loans are 5 discount points, $6.95 worth of my own fees, and 15% interest on a 6-month balloon. So theoretically, I should be able to earn the 5 points twice plus the 15% interest. So that ends up being a little over 25% in a year.
Okay, I was going to say, and it's a 12-month loan, or is it, how does that work from there?
It's a 6-month balloon. If they need to extend beyond the 6 months, I charge an additional 2 points for every 3 months that they want to go beyond that.
So hard money is a big driver in your business model.
Well, and so there are plenty of other people out there that do hard money for a lot less than what I do. But my competitive advantage in that space is that I'm capable, I have money ready and willing to go. I'm capable of making a decision relatively quickly. And so the people that have cheaper money, they want your last 23 years tax returns, every lease that you've ever had. They want to know who you went out with in the 8th grade and, all sorts of other crazy stuff. Whereas I could talk to somebody in 5 minutes sort of get a sense of who they are, go take a look at the project, run comps, know, and my criteria on a hard money loan is I have a 3-call rule. So my question is, if somebody messes up and isn't able to perform and I can't sort of work with them through that process, I want to be able to resell that property with 3 phone calls, not list it with an agent for 6 months and, play games here and there. So, but because I can move fast, there are a lot of times that the importance of getting a deal done is a lot more important than the price that somebody's paying for their money.
Okay, so typically in my world, when I loan money out of my IRA, it's not a fast transaction. I mean, I have to go through some processes, some paperwork with my custodial. And if you didn't know this, ladies and gentlemen, custodial is an organization that holds your IRA money, right? And usually takes at least 3 or 4 or 5 days to get that process done. Is that typical for you? And do you loan more out of your self-directed IRA, or is it just coffers that you have just allocated for hard money?
So it's typically, so number one, you can, if you have the ability, you really should be setting up a self-directed 401k. Because with the self-directed 401k, you have the ability to be your own trustee, which means the money is in a checking account that you have the checkbook for. So there's nobody else that's going to slow you down. Number two, if you figure out how to do the paperwork right the first time, I can typically almost always get my deals funded through my custodians within 48 hours.
No, because you're Bob Dressman.
No, it's so custodians are a huge bureaucratic organization. So they have a very large checklist. And so if you do what they ask you to do, the deal happens really fast. The problem is that probably 90% of the people that submit the paperwork do it wrong, then they have to make corrections and send it back. So if you get to the point where you're doing this on a fairly regular basis, well, you figure out what they're looking for and you just give it to them the first time, and it greatly simplifies things. And then if you start to get to know your custodians and just talk to them and figure out what they want and do what they want, then they're happy to bend over backwards to help you. Okay.
Now, you mentioned just a little while ago self-directed Roth, and then you mentioned the 401k. Now, this is not my wheelhouse. I do have a self-directed Roth IRA that I loan out of and try to build up tax-free. What's the advantages or disadvantages between the two? Can you give me some info on the 401k? Because I thought the 401k is a corporation thing.
In order to have a self-directed 401k, you need to have self-employment income.
Okay.
So, or you need to have like an LLC that you own that you're earning money out of. A self-directed 401k is really superior to an IRA in almost every way. So, number one, it's a lot less paperwork. Number two, there are some technical advantages to it that when you're dealing with a self-directed account, if you engage in what's called a prohibited transaction, basically you're not allowed to take money out and go to the casino with it and then put it back. You're not allowed to lend money to your kids or your parents or do specific types of deals with people that are called prohibited parties. So if you would accidentally engage in one of those type of transactions in a self-directed IRA, it blows up the entire account. So literally all that money ends up being distributed and you end up paying 50-60% of it in taxes and penalties. In a self-directed 401k, if you would accidentally do that, it only blows up that single transaction, not the entire account. Then when you're doing transactions in an IRA, if you borrow money to do the transaction, you have to pay what's called unrelated business income tax.
You bet.
If you're, and that's at a trust rate, which is a very high income tax rate. Now, there are times that it's advantageous to do that as a way to basically cram more money into the account to have a bigger chunk to compound later on. However, in a self-directed 401k, if it's going to be an asset that you're going to typically hold for at least a year for rental purposes, there's a UBIT exemption, so you don't have to pay that tax. Then but it becomes a lot easier to get transactions done when you have the checking account rather than having to deal with getting paperwork approved through a custodian. Now, sort of with those advantages comes some more responsibility. So if you're the type of person that dumps a big wheelbarrow full of receipts on your accountant's desk every April 12th, this is probably not the account for you. But if you're capable of doing, some basic bookkeeping and that type of thing, it really is a much better type of account.
So the checkbook IRA, is that because, the checkbook, so is the checkbook 401k, is that the same? Because I hear people talk about the checkbook IRA. Is that speaking of the same language?
Well, so there's actually a recent, it's not so recent anymore, tax court decision that a lot of the ways that people have set up what they call checkbook IRAs is fundamentally a prohibited transaction, which means they're in danger of getting their accounts blown up and distributed. Whereas the way the tax code is written, to have checkbook control in a 401k is completely legitimate. And because of the way they sort of envision setting up these accounts, they're designed for small businesses. And so the person who's going to be the trustee of a small business account is going to be one of the business owners. Whereas in an IRA, they really don't want you directly touching that money at all.
So basically, just real recap, is the difference between the Roth and the 401 is that you're in control in the 401k.
Yeah, so within the 401k, there can be both a regular component and the Roth component. So it's really a difference between an IRA and a 401k. And so with a 401k, you are in control. And so it's much better. Okay.
You mentioned that a business owner could start one of these 401. What if I had several LLCs? Can I have more than one 401k?
You can, but the contribution limits are based on your self-employment income. So it's really advantageous for you to just have one rather than have multiple, because you end up paying double the transaction or accounting costs and maintenance costs and whatnot.
So you're passionate about this. How do you stay informed? Is there websites that you read, tax law? How do you stay privy to this vein of investing?
So there are a couple of things. I listen to a lot of different people. I go to my local real estate investors association meetings. When I get interested in something, I just read up on it, and when I see something that I've never seen before, I'm like, wow, that's cool. Just the other day, I saw that an estate had transferred real estate just by an affidavit rather than actually opening up an estate, which seemed like a whole lot simpler process. So I'm like, well, man, I need to find out about that. So, at my local association meeting, I was talking to a lawyer I know, and we discussed the pros and cons of doing that thing. And so sort of as you get actively engaged in the business and you interact with a lot of other people that are smarter than yourself, you sort of gain that knowledge by osmosis. So it's just critical that you're connected with other investors and that you have a chance to sort of see real world deals and see what other people are doing.
Awesome. All right, we're going to wrap this up because I don't want to take too much of your time, but you're coming down and speaking in April. Tell me what you're going to be presenting on. How's it? Give us a little teaser of what you're going to be talking about.
So I'm going to talk about some of the uses and how I've used my self-directed accounts and sort of how you can really compound money and generate a whole lot of money real quick. There's a talk that I do a lot of times on inherited IRAs. And so there's basically a way that you can figure out you can make all the money that you'll ever need tax-free and take it out today and spend it today. So that's something we'll talk about. And then I do a lot of owner financing, and I'll probably talk a little bit about that, and that allows me to generate, the 20, 25, 30, 35% internal rate of returns.
Man, that is something that's really hot and wild in Oklahoma City. There's actually a class action suit in the process. And so if that's okay with you, I can call you back in a couple of days and we can discuss that, if that's cool with you.
Absolutely. That sounds fascinating.
All right. Well, listen, folks, you just heard just a snippet of what Bob Dressman is all about. He's very passionate about IRAs, 401ks, but man, he's been a landlord for how many years have you been a landlord?
Since 1991. So, 27 years now. Man,
I'm 1999. So yeah, you're my grandpa. No, man, it's an honor to just get this time from you, and Oklahoma City is excited to see a real investor just pour out this heart on what you found to be successful for you and your family, and we're just looking forward to April 20th.
Sounds great. We're going to have lots of fun.
All right.
Investor Weekend is not far off, with over 10 information sessions to increase your portfolio. Log on to www.investorweekend.com. Whether you are a seasoned investor or never purchased a property before, you don't want to miss the Investor Weekend. Join us for a powerful, knowledge-packed weekend with over 10 informational sessions that are bound to enlarge your real estate investments. You will hear from the best national and local real estate investors that will share practical and relevant experiences with you, the investor. There will be several networking sessions to connect with other like-minded people for potential funding, partnerships, and yes, hot deals. Go to www.investorweekend.com. Did you know we meet once a month for the Landlord Lunch Meeting? The third Wednesday of every month. Go to landlordlunch.com.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.